You guys look good. Man, I'm gonna go ahead and start by welcoming everybody joining us all around the world online. We literally have people joining us from everywhere. We got our Lake Worth Beach campus. We got Dade CI. We got Homestead. We got people joining in from Dubai. I know people literally have their laptops and their tablets in prisons all around the country. Man, we're so glad that you're here today. For those of you guys that may not know, my name is Scott Williams. I'm kind of like a guest that's not a guest. I'm kind of family around here. And I tell you, man, it's hard to go preach other places because you guys are so amazing. The crowds are amazing. You make a brother feel so good. I'm telling you, don't tell all the other churches this, but this is my favorite church to preach at. I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you right now, I love it. But, and so I'm excited to be able to share God's word today. I just want to say, man, it's really cool, all that God is doing with Church by the Glades. I love what's happening with the partnership with Fort Lauderdale Baptist, because here's what I know. I've been a church consultant for over a decade, and I've worked with lots of churches that have done mergers, they've done partnerships, they've done all these different things. And when I've done that, I see that you can see when God's hand is clearly on connecting the dots of the things that he's gonna do to be able to reach more people with the good news of Jesus. And he was connecting the dots multiple decades ago with Pastor David, and it's just cool to see. For those of you guys that may be watching that have been Fort Lauderdale Baptist forever, man, we love you. Glad you guys are part of the family. Love what God is doing. Let's just give a hand clap for all that God is doing and will continue to do. You know what I'm saying? One thing about connecting the dots, the great theologian Steve Jobs said it this way: you can never connect the dots looking forwards, only looking backwards. And as I look at my time and all that God has prepared me to be able to do and places I've been able to share God's word and preach, I'm able to connect the dots when I look back. I remember way back in the day when I was in the prison system. For those of you guys that are new, I was a warden. You know what I'm saying? But true story, I was one of the youngest prison wardens in the country. And I remember I was a prison warden and we were there, and my administrator, her name was Dana Avance. And she was a great woman of God. And I remember we had a tour group that was coming through our facility one day. They were coming through our facility, and Dana came up there with me to meet the tour group. It was some really important people. But again, I'm in my 20s, you know what I'm saying? Just really got serious about running after God. I was at the early stages of it, right? You know what I'm saying? And so when I remember the group came, one of the guys was a state senator. I won't say his name, but we greeted him at the front. We go and I shake their hands and I greet him. And he looked at me and says, "Are you one of the inmates?" I said, "Is your mama?" Hey. No. You should have seen Dana's face. He said, "Excuse me." I said, "Man, I wish I was in the Bahamas." You know what I'm saying? But I say that to say, that's a reminder as I'm connecting the dots that it's important the words that you say. But again, our brother was still, I'm following Jesus, but I'm still a little hood, you know what I'm saying? And so we're doing, and it's so I remember saying that. I'll never forget that day. But as I look forward and all that God has done in the years, again, I was in my 20s. I didn't have the blessing of having a ministry like Rally to make sure that I'm grounded. I don't say things like your mama, you know what I'm saying? And if you're a young adult, you know some young adults, you want to be a young adult, you need to be here next week for Rally Loud. It's going to be a great time. By show of hands, how many of you guys are going to be here next week? All right, okay, almost a quarter of the room. So the older folks I'm gonna try to slide in. I don't wanna say it in front of everybody, right? But no, I know it's gonna be amazing. What Pastor Charlie and his team has done has been nothing short of spectacular. I've seen it when it first started to seeing all that God has done in a short amount of time. Just give a hand clap for what's going on young adult. God's hand is literally on every aspect of this church, from children's ministry, young adults, youth, it's just crazy, the partnership, because when God shows up, your situation blows up. Because so many churches, they're praying and wish they could have what God is doing here, but that's not always how it goes. But I'm talking about the importance of the things that you say. And so what I want to do is I just want to kind of go back to the early stages in the Bible, the very, very early books of the Bible. This is not the verse that I'm going to preach, but I just want to let it establish some foundation. We're going to go to Genesis. And so the very beginning, Genesis 1, verses 1 through 3. And I'm going to highlight a couple of things. And what? And God said, and what? God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the what? The darkness. So from very early, he said, "Let there be light," and there was. He said it. There's power in your words. He said it. Let's jump down. So we're gonna do Genesis 1, 2, and 3. It's a couple of verses from each. Let's go Genesis 2, verse 16 and 17. And the Lord God commanded. So here's God again speaking, commanding the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for you will eat from it, you will certainly die. So God is established, he's saying it, God's saying it, we just need to be able to respond what God says. And just let's jump and look real quick in Genesis 3. Genesis 3, verse 1 through 3. Verse 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He what? He said. He what? He said. He said to the woman, did you really, come on, did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, we may not eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat from the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or what? You will die. And so like God is like, he's laying it out, like he's saying a thing. And so you think about this, like in this moment, like Adam and Eve are chilling, God lays it out, and then Eve does what Eve does. If you don't know the story, just go read your Bible, right? And so she does what she does, and I know, come on, I know Adam is like, yo, Eve, for real? Like, we're just gonna blame it on Eve right now, you know what I'm saying? Like you did what? Like, what you talking about, Eve? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a reference. How many of you guys seen the show Different Strokes by show of hands? Different Strokes, okay. How many of you guys have no idea what Different Strokes is by show of hands? Okay, about half the room. I get it. Like, it's a really, really old show. That means those of us that raise our hand, we're really, really old. But I want to say like Different Strokes was like, it's a show that we need in our time. I'll just kind of sum it up. You had these two kids, like younger brother, older brother, Arnold and Willis. Like their mom was a housekeeper for this really rich man named Philip Drummond. She dies and he adopts the two kids from Harlem. And so mind you, these two kids from Harlem and this rich white family, and they basically touched on all the cultural issues of the time. But what they would do is like, but Arnold had this catchphrase that became the phrase of like almost 2 decades. He basically said like, if something went crazy, he would often be talking to his brother, but he moved it on to kind of ask everybody the question. And I think it's a question that we need to begin to ask ourselves. Here's a kind of little clip from our young folks that never seen it and a reminder for us old ones.
What you talking about, Willis? What you talking about, Santa? What you talking about, Mr. D? What you talking about, Willis? What you talking about, Doctor? What you talking about, Dad? Hold it. What you talking about, Aunt Cecilia?
Some of my young folks are like, I don't even see what's so funny. I can't help it that y'all generation is special and don't know talent when you see it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was the good stuff. Like, I was talking to my Indian parties like, no, Scott, I'm younger, but that's what we watched. We were poor. We watched some program where you watched all the old shows, right? And so, but it's interesting, as I dive back into what Arnold was saying during the time, a reminder of what the time is now, like, I wanted to set the stage for what God said early on. But today, I'm gonna preach on one verse. I've never done this before. I'm gonna preach on one verse. I've established a few verses. I'll highlight a few others, but I'm gonna preach on one verse. Everybody say one verse. One verse is what I'm gonna preach on. And the verse I'm gonna preach on is Proverbs 18:21. And let me tell you what really brought this verse to my attention was probably, again, it was in the early 2000s. The lady I told you, Dana A. Vance, who was a great woman of God, she was my administrator when I was a prison warden. And I was a young guy. She'd always say, she's like, Scott, here's what you don't understand. Like, I've been working in different fields for the last 30 years, and you bring the most godly leadership of anybody that I've ever seen. So as a matter of fact, like, you epitomize the first part of Proverbs 18:21. I really didn't know what Proverbs or 18:21 was back then, right? You know what I'm saying? I just kind of, and so I began to look and understand it, but after today, this is the verse that every single one of you guys will know, and you'll tuck it away in your pocket, you'll put it in your notes, you'll put it on your refrigerator, you're gonna have it memorized, and it's really important. Here's what Proverbs 18:21 says. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Let me say that again. The tongue has the power of life and death. I'm gonna preach this real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and unpack it. But the tongue has the power of life and death. And those who love it, what's the it that you love? Do you love life or do you love death? Because whichever one you love, you will eat its fruit. So the question for you is, what is it that you love? Do you love speaking life or do you love speaking death? Because whichever one you love, that's the fruit that you're gonna eat. I think that's important for you to understand today. And here's what I want you to understand about Proverbs. I mean, as we look at what different theologians say about Proverbs, it's very important, but these shouldn't be treated like no horoscope or no just like, hey, what this says is what's going to happen or some fortune telling. But basically, if you look at Proverbs, what the scholars say it's the Bible's wisdom literature. It showcases prominent use of really concise and memorable proverbs to impart moral teachings, practical advice, and wisdom. Ascribed mainly by King Solomon, who was the wisest man, who ever lived. And these proverbs, they were regarded as divine wisdom inspired by God to guide us in righteous living, godly pursuits, and things according to his word. Again, Proverbs serve as general observations rather than absolute promises. I want to make this clear. Presenting these principles as a guideline in wise decision making and navigating things in life. And from a theological perspective, these proverbs, but commonly viewing them as practical tools in living. And so the use of proverbs in the Bible basically underscores the value of seeking timeless wisdom to inform our lives. And so we look at it from the broader biblical narrative, but that's what we got to understand, what's the importance of Proverbs. So I'm telling you during our time right now, this is the one thing that I'm not just saying generation by age, but what we need right now in culture and in the world, we need some wisdom, right? Because I'm here to tell you right now, there seems to be a lot of wisdom that is lacked in the decisions that I see and make, people, what I see saying on social media, what we see on TV, what we hear about. But we got to understand, your talk is really important. If you don't walk away with anything else today, what you say matters. And God established it from the very, very beginning. He spoke and said, let there be light, and there was, right? And so we got to understand the importance of the things that we say. And so the three things, if you're taking notes, is this. The three ways your talk affects your walk. Because the title of today's message is, what are you talking about? My question is, matter of fact, turn around to your neighbor right now and say, what are you talking about? Matter of fact, let me go ahead and take the R out of there because that's how Arnold said, what you talking about? Turn around to your other neighbor and say, what you talking about? First thing, if you're taking notes, write this one down. Your talk can help you win. Everybody say help you win. Let's go back, looking at one verse, so this should be easy for you. The tongue has the power of life. I just stop right there. The tongue has the power of life. In other words, you can infuse encouragement, which is to infuse courage in somebody. You can uplift somebody. You can tell them they're doing amazing. You can help point them. I always say that encouragement is the fuel that propels us down the road of success. And many of you, what you're just missing that little bit of that encouragement that can propel you down the road of success. And that's what, when you're talking about speaking life, that's what it does. Because it's almost like we run around here, we're wondering why things in our life look a certain way. And it's because we're not speaking life. But if you think about it, I don't know what it is. I always like to look at it like this. Imagine this, you're dealing with your life and the things you got going on. And what you got, you're like, you know what? I want to speak life. And when you speak life, you imagine you're going around and you wake up and you're like, you know what? Man, today I'm going to win. You know what? I'm going to have success today. I don't care what they say. You know what? I don't like my boss, but you know what? I'm grateful that I got a job. You know what? My son, he ain't doing the right things, but he's making one step. He went to church last week. He said some encouraging thing. You get up in the morning and you wake up and the first thing you do is you look in the mirror and you say that I'm more than enough. And what you're doing is you're filling up your box and you're filling up your jar with these positive things as you begin to do it. I'm telling you, it's something that you can visually see. Speaking life is something you can visually see, right? And so my question for you today is, what are some positive things that you have spoken today? Many of you can't say that. You don't even know what it is. What are some positive things you've spoken over your kids today? How about this week? What are some positive things you've spoken on social media this week? What are some positive things you've spoken when you've been in those chat conversations and those group texts? Or are you speaking death? But you want to make sure that when I look at what I'm saying in the group chat, am I speaking life or is it some negative stuff? I got to speak life. What are the life-giving things that you need to speak? What are the life-giving things that you know you need to speak? What are the things that you've been running around holding on to and you haven't been speaking life, but you're saying, you know what, from today on, I'm going to speak life. Because you can see it. And many of you guys, you're uncomfortable right now because if you're being honest, you hadn't been speaking life. You hadn't been encouraging others. You hadn't even been encouraging your own kids. And some of you may be encouraging other people, but then you're not encouraging your own kids. What are you doing to speak life? Because what you want to do is you want to make sure it's not just something that you do in a moment, but you're always trying to find ways to encourage somebody. The panhandler on the street, y'all, they just need to get a job. You know what? Maybe they don't need a job. Maybe what they need is a break. Maybe they need somebody to sit down and come and just encourage them today. Have you thought about that? What are the things that you can say? I'm going to make sure that I'm speaking life, because sometimes all people need is some encouragement. But many of you are running around and you're avoiding speaking life, and you're wondering why the fruit that you're eating is not that of life. This isn't what I said. This is what the Proverbs says. Those who love it, do you love speaking life or do you love speaking death? I remember early on in my career, one of the criticisms I get of my leadership is that, Scott, you're too positive. You're too encouraging. You're always speaking positive about your team members. You know what? I'll take that criticism every time. But here's what I don't want you to confuse. I don't want you to confuse me speaking positive and encouraging and speaking life with I'm being soft, because I'm here to tell you right now, some of the greatest life-giving conversation you will have is the toughest conversation that you've ever had. I know that's the most life-giving things I've had is somebody's told me something in love. And that's what's going to speak life. Some of you need to have that conversation with your spouse today. It's going to be a tough one, but you're going to speak life. Some of you need to have that conversation with your kids. You've been kind of letting them get over, well, I know they're doing this, but I'm still going to let them play sports because they're good at sports. But their attitude is not good. If they can't get it together, we're not going to let them do it. What are the things you do? Like this relationship, you know that relationship that you're in is not honoring God. But you know what, but they're working on themselves. They can work on themselves outside of you, because you need to make sure that you're working on what God has for you. Because if you sit there and settle for this, you'll find yourself settling for more and more. Because here's this, the more you settle for mediocrity, the more it looks like genius. And maybe that's what you're doing. You're not speaking life because you're settling for mediocrity. And when I talk about speaking life, oftentimes the main person that needs to hear it is yourself. Some of the greatest sermons you'll ever preach, the ones you preach to yourself. What does it look like for you to look in the mirror today and speak life? Those you online, Dade CI, Homestead, Lake Worth Beach, think about it right now. Write in your notes, where do I need to speak life? What are some areas that are falling short? I can almost guarantee the areas that are falling short, those are areas that you're not speaking life. I mean, you find any sports team that's winning and has had success or wins a championship, every single time there's an interview, they always talk about, oh man, the coach just believed and he spoke this over us, or so-and-so teammate, he spoke this over us. If you look at this, we believe this. I mean, even if you look at the run that the Heat had, you always heard that Butler just kept believing. He kept speaking life over. Spoelstra kept believing. And the reason they were winning, because there was always someone that was speaking life. Second thing, if you're taking notes, you can write this down, is that your talk can lead you to a dead end. So it can help you win, but it can also lead you to a dead end. So again, verse 18 through 21, the tongue has the power of life and death. One more time, and death. This is an important one, because honestly, many of us, what we do, we speak death and we don't even realize it. And not only do we speak death, but we allow people to speak death over us. We allow people to say death things over us. We allow people to say death things to us. Matter of fact, I'm gonna be honest with you, that's why I don't watch the 10 o'clock news or the evening news. You know why? Because 90% of it is negative. I'm just gonna be honest, if you work for the news station, God bless you. I hope that you're in sports or weather. Everything else, I don't need it. You know what I'm saying? Like, people are like, how do you know what's going on? If it's that crazy, somebody will text me. You know what I'm saying? Like if it's something like the hell is coming, Scott, you need to know, like, yeah, all right, man, hell, I'm from Oklahoma. Hell, not meaning like hell, meaning like hell from the sky. We get tornadoes in hell. But speaking death, and so many of you, like, that's what your life looks like. You're speaking death, and you're just, you know what, you just load up. And what does it look like to speak death? You know what? It's just a story of my life, man. I ain't gonna never get up. You know what I'm saying? There's no way that I can win. I can't succeed. I'm not like Pastor David. I mean, Pastor Charlie, look at him. He's a young guy and just able to get up there and do that. Everybody don't have that opportunity, have that talent. You know what, man? This is just my life. You don't know what side of the tracks that I was raised on. You know what? Said my mom and them, they don't think that I'm gonna make it. My boss always be tripping. Here's the deal, my girlfriend, she's got a good man and she's kind of out there, you know what I'm saying? I've been fasting and praying, I ain't gonna get no good man because that's just who I am. That's just my story. I don't know what the negative things, the death things that you've been speaking over your life is, but what it looks like, you notice that when you speak death, these weigh a lot more than life. And guess what? When we talk about like filling up with speaking death, if we see it fills up a whole lot quicker. I was talking about speaking life, but with death, you know what? It's like, you know what? They was on the highway and they said something to him. Next thing you know, I flipped on the bird. I pulled over and said, you want to get some? And next thing you know, I did this. And this was all on my way to church. You know what I'm saying? Like, but honestly, but again, and many of you like, you laugh at this, but if you're asking yourself, if you ask your friends and family, they say, which one is more of an example of what you've been feeling in your life, and what would they say? It's a tough question, but you got to ask tough questions to get honest answers. And many of you, it's this, and you've been feeling it with death. And if you're wondering why your life looks the way that it does, why you're having the problems that you're having, that's why. It's because, this is simple stuff, but we make it hard. Like, again, like if you just sit there and think like, okay, God, like I want to make sure that I'm speaking life. But death is so much easier to speak, so much easier to gossip, so much easier how to talk about she thinks she all that. It's so much easier to be a hater with somebody online. It's so much easier to discourage somebody or talk about what they can't do or what they ain't or what they think they are than it is to be able to speak life. But oftentimes when you're speaking that, it's just a reflection of what you got going on inside and the insecurities that you have. And, some of the death stuff you're speaking, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, it's cussing. I'm going to make it uncomfortable for people right now. I'm going to ask by show of hands, how many of you guys are No, I ain't going to do it. You know what I'm saying? Look, we got hands going up all over here. You know what I'm saying? Right here in the middle section. All my cussers are right here in the middle. I didn't even get through the question and they were raising their hand, right? I'm going to go ahead and park right there for a minute because I think it's important. Because we like to just say, oh, cussing's no big deal. Like cussing ain't no big deal. It's just a little cussing. But is it? Here's what I want to ask my cussers. My cussers, do you cuss in church? No. So in other words, like you have selective cussing. So you can choose. Do you cuss around your mama? Do you cuss around your grandma? And then also, I don't like to give caveats, but I'm going to say this. There's some generational stuff here. For those of you that are like 65 and up, like you can go to Denny's and get like discounted lunch or breakfast. You've kind of been grandfathered in because I don't know what it was about that generation, but they cuss a whole lot more than others, right? And they just do it kind of eloquently, right? But here's the deal, like, I'm not a cusser, I don't cuss. Like, I'm being honest, like, I only keep it one way and that's a bug. Like, I don't cuss. But the problem the area that I do struggle with is I still listen to music that cusses. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just being honest, like, because sometimes, I be trying some of the Christian rap working out, but like, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes, I try to do the clean version. I'm just being honest, right? The Lord is working on me still at my age. Y'all clapping too hard. That ain't giving y'all permission. Yeah, he working on Pastor and me, right? But if I'm being honest, I'm sitting there thinking like, I still try to say like, I do want to make a conscious effort to try to do better even in that area. Because here's what we got to understand. Like some of you guys, let's just be honest, like you're the age or generation, like when you listen to cussing and listen to certain music, like it does influence you. You hear dun and dun and dun, hit the blunt, do this and this and that. And you leave out and go dun and dun and dun and hit the blunt. Like that's what you do, right? I'm just going to be honest. Like I listen to it, I ain't going to do none of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not going to affect me like that. But again, I've kind of matured through some things, not to make excuses. I'm just being real honest right here, but I do try to work on it. But it's something like I encourage, like that's the one thing that you can change. You can change whether or not you're going to cuss. Because Isaiah speaks of like, having an unclean mouth. And many of you are like, well, but it's just a little cussing. You don't do it at church. You don't do it around grandma and them. That's an area you can win in today. You can say, you know what? I'm not going to do it. As a matter of fact, some of you guys like, how many of you guys say cuss and how many of you guys say cuss or curse? Or how many of you guys say cuss? Cuss by show of hands. How many of you guys say curse? Curse. Okay, a lot of you guys say curse. I've always said the people that saying curse, they don't know what they talking about. You know what I'm saying? Like, but as I was researching for this message, like I learned that there's a difference between cussing and cursing, right? Cussing is profanity. Cursing is actually speaking a curse over somebody. That's when you speak something negative. Some of you guys say, oh, wow, I wouldn't do that. You say, I hate you. I wish you were dead. You get on my last nerve. I wish you would just run off a cliff. I can't stand her. I hear people say it about elected officials. I'm not talking politics, but many people say things. But here's what the Bible says about cursing. I want to just encourage you guys with this, because some of you guys are cursers. I wish she would whatever. That's who some of you guys are. Here's what the Bible says in Psalms 109:17. He loved to pronounce a curse. A what? Curse. May it come back to him. He found no pleasure in blessing. May it be far from him. In other words, like a boomerang, when you're out there cursing somebody and wishing ill on somebody, the psalmist is saying, you know what, that's gonna go out there, but guess where it's coming around to? It's coming right back around to you and showing up at your doorstep. And for those of you that won't be a blessing to nobody, guess what? That blessing is gonna be far away from you. So I can tell you what's going on with your life and what you're speaking by what the fruit of it is, because this text is all about the fruit. And so we talk about leading to a dead end. We're really talking about death. Matter of fact, it's really like somebody like it's a death wish. Somebody's threatening your life. I remember I used to sit on the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board, and we got a death threat one time. We got death threats several times because we're the ones that decide whether people are executed or not. And somebody, called and gave a death threat. They was going to kill us all or whatever. And I'm like, to be honest with you, I didn't even trip over it. I'm like, whatever. It is like, I don't even trip over that stuff, because at the end of the day, because if I receive that negativity, then I'm allowing somebody else to speak something negative over me. I'll let the security officials pay attention to what's gonna happen, but I'm not gonna be tripping worried about what somebody else said, because I'm not gonna allow what they speak over my life to affect my life. But what some of you guys are done, you've been giving your life death threats because of the words you say. You're speaking death over your life. You're allowing those death threats to show up in your life. Because what you got to understand is that things are going to come, and you're going to have there's going to be areas of your life where there's going to be some problems. And there's going to be things that you say, you know what, I'm not going to allow these death threats to come over me. Speaking of death, oh my, that's a smooth transition to death, right? But there's this story, I'm from Oklahoma, and there's a story, this farmer from Oklahoma, and he had this mule. And first of all, some of you cussers are going to say, well, Pastor Scott, it says ass in the Bible. It's talking about a donkey in King James. Okay, if you're talking about a donkey, more power to you, right? And so there's a donkey, this mule, and this farmer, he used it. He was one of his best, mules, worked for him for many years. And one day the mule was out in the farm area, and he fell into the well. There was a well that he hadn't used in a while. He fell into the well, and there was no way that he could get him out. He kept trying everything to get him out. As he tried to get him out, next thing you know, the donkey started, making noise. I don't know what kind of noises donkeys make. I'm from Oklahoma, I should, but he's making all these noises, and the donkey's making noise. They can't get him out, and they're trying to get him out. And so finally he just thought, you know what? I think it's better that we just kill the donkey. You know what I'm saying? I think it's better that we just cover the donkey up, right? I think it's better that we just cover the donkey up. And so he went and got his neighbor. He said, hey, we got this dirt over here. What we need to do is we just need to take the dirt, shovel it over, and we need to go ahead and bury the donkey. I mean, he served me well. Let's go ahead and bury him, right? And so they're getting, all the neighbors, they come and they get shovels, and they get the shovels, and they start digging, the shovel, and they start covering the donkey. And they keep covering the donkey, and they covering the donkey. So all of them are shoveling, they're shoveling their stuff, and they're doing their stuff. And as they continue to shovel, all of a sudden, it got quiet. It got quiet, and then the farmer looked down. As he looked down, he couldn't believe it. Every single time the dirt would hit the donkey's back, he would shake it off and take a step up. They shovel, he would shake it off and take a step up. They continue to shovel dirt, and he continued to shake it off and take a step up. They continue to put dirt on him. He continued to shake it off and take a step up. And he continued to do it more and more and more and more. And then the donkey finally walked out, and he was lifted from the well and lifted from the dirt. And that's a reminder to you that there's gonna be some dirt that's gonna be thrown on you. Life is gonna bring you some negative things. Life is gonna put some dirt on you. But all you gotta do is say, you know what? I'm gonna shake it off, and I'm gonna take a step up. I'm gonna shake it off, and I'm gonna take a step up, because you're going to refuse to accept the death that people speak over you. And then another part of the story is later on, the donkey comes back, and he bit the farmer who was trying to bury him alive. And the farmer ended up getting an infection, and he ended up dying from septic shock. And the moral of that story is this: if you do something wrong and try to cover up your ass, it'll come back to bury you. I was King James preaching there. Covered the donkey. Last thing, if you're taking notes, is this: your talk can satisfy you from within. Everybody say from within. Everybody say satisfy. The tongue has the power of life and death. We know which ones. And those who love it, do you love life or do you love death? Those who love it will eat its fruit. So the question is, what is showing up at your table? What's the fruit that you're eating? And here's what's interesting. As I was preparing for this message, again, I was just preaching on one verse, Proverbs 18:21. But if you actually look in Hebrew literature, there's often a linguistic emphasis on the story or the phrases or the communication before the communication. And so I thought it was important that we pull up verse 20, because verse 20 is actually the emphasis. Verse 20 says this: from the fruit of their mouth, a person's stomach is filled. With the harvest of their lips, they are what? Satisfied. They are satisfied. And we think about being satisfied. Satisfied is not always a good thing. Many of you are satisfied with status quo. You're satisfied with that guy that you know is not God's best. You're satisfied with that relationship that isn't good. You're satisfied with that job that you know you need to leave because every single day you go in, you're saying, this is immoral, I don't want to be here. What is it that you're satisfied? Others are saying, you know what, I'm satisfied because I'm speaking life, I'm encouraging, I'm doing the right thing. I'm satisfied because the band's gonna come play behind me and make me sound more spiritual as I close. What is it that's satisfying you? I want you to think about that right now. Because if you look at that word satisfied, I mean, the most direct translation in the Hebrew is mirotse. And it conveys a sense of contentment or fulfillment. And many of you guys, that's what you've done. You become content and fulfilled. Speaking death. Some of you are on the other side, you're like, man, I love speaking life. I love encouraging somebody. And some of you guys, you know that person, all they do is they always speak life and they always just got a smile on their face. And you know why? It's because they understand the power of the tongue. The tongue has the power of life and death. And that's what you're gonna understand today. If you don't understand anything else, I have a choice in the things that I speak. And whichever decision I make, that's what's gonna impact my life. It reminds me, again, I told you I sit on the pardon and parole board. And we had different inmates that would come up from us every single month. And those of you at Dade, CI, and Homestead, you know what I'm talking about. You're going up for parole. And I remember this lady that came up in front of us, and they're pleading their case. This is what I've done. This is how God has changed my life. These are the things that I'm doing. I remember this one lady, she came up. I'll never forget what she said. She said, you know what? All my life until now, I used to always think that I was a product of my environment. But now I realize that I'm a product of my choices. The things that I've said, the things that I believed, and the things that I did. And so we're talking about like what you're eating. It matters, like the things that you're feeding yourself, because the fruit that you're gonna eat depends on the things that you're speaking. This is what the Proverbs say. If you don't hear anything else, it's important that you hear this, because here's what I stand. As I was listening to her share, it's a reminder that positive talk leads to positive walk. I'm here to tell you that people that are speaking positive, they're not gonna fall into the negativity. And God's made it very clear in the very beginning in Genesis. That's why what you got to understand is that he talked about light and darkness. Here's the deal. Darkness can be there all day. But guess what? When light shows up, darkness has got to leave. The room can be dark. When you turn that light on, darkness has got to leave. The same thing is true when we talk about life and death. Because here's the reality. If we look and we've been speaking life, we've been doing what we need to do, and we're walking around and it's full of life, there's no room for death. There's no room for death. If you're running around your life every single day and you're speaking life, guess what? There's no room for it. There's no room for it. But on the other hand, I'm here to tell you that we talked about that, you know what, that darkness has to leave when light shows up. It's the same thing that's true when you're speaking death. There's always room for life when you're speaking death, because you know what? Just like the Bible reminds us that when you begin to speak life, guess what? Death may be full, but there's always room for life. There's always room for life because we know who the light is and we know who the one is, and light will always surround death, and that's what we know. We serve an amazing God that reminds us that your life has looked like some death. You've spoken some negativity, but if you will just continue to speak life, you guess what? Death, you gotta go somewhere, because we serve an amazing God. We serve a God that says, you know what? I want you to speak life. We serve a God that says, you know what? I got life for you. I don't know what you came in here with today, but God sent me a whole lot of miles to remind you. You've been speaking death. You've been allowing others to speak death over you. No more. Death, you got to go somewhere. And the question that you need to ask yourself and you need to ask others from here on out is, what you talking about? Let's pray. Father, I thank you so much for every single person that's under the sound of my voice, those that are online, Dade, CI, Homestead, Lake Worth Beach. For those of you, if you're being honest, you say, you know what, Pastor Scott, I wish I could honestly say that I've been speaking life, but if I'm being honest, my life has looked more like speaking death over myself and others. And I want to go before God and say, God, no more, God. I want life to show. If that's you and that's your prayer here and online, just raise your hand high right now so I can pray over you. God, hands going up all over the room. God, I pray for every single person that has their hand lifted high right now. Those who are making decisions, say, you know what? I'm going to speak life today, God. And as they speak life, may that be the thing that they eat. May life come back to them. May their business be blessed. May their health be blessed. May their relationships be blessed because they chose to speak life. Others of you, you say, you know what? I've been speaking life, but I want to do my part to make sure I help others see the life and see the light. Just raise your hand as well. All across the room. God, I pray for every single hand raised all across this room, God. Because of these hands that are being raised right now, Lord, I see the chains of addiction that are being broken right now. Marriages are being restored. Finances are increased. Encouragement. People are excited. Things are going to happen. Things are going to be different. People walking out here today with a smile on their face because they're going to run a race, making the decision to speak life. We love you and we thank you. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said, amen. Let's give it up for Jesus today.